$1,130. That's what it costs to change planes in El Salvador if you're holding the wrong passport. A video went viral this week of an Indian travel creator getting hit with this fee at check-in. No warning, no negotiation, pay or don't board. But this isn't new. It's been in effect since October of 2023. 57 countries are included on the list. Every nation in Africa, plus India. Over 2 billion people priced out of a layover. And most of the people sharing this video are angry at the wrong thing. First, why this fee exists and what it's really designed to do. Second, the global pattern of nationality-based travel restrictions that most people don't realize is accelerating. And finally, and this is the one that matters if you're American or European, why your passport isn't as untouchable as you think it is. El Salvador's Port Authority, the CEPA, rolled this out on October 23rd of 2023. They called it an airport improvement fee. The official line is that it's funds for modernizing the country's main international airport under President Bukele's infrastructure push. Now that's the press release, but here's the pattern. 3 days before the fee went live, Bukele sat down with the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemisphere Affairs. The topic, irregular migration. El Salvador's airport is Avianca's biggest hub in Central America. The route was straightforward. People would come from West Africa to Madrid, from Madrid to Bogota, from Bogota to San Salvador in El Salvador, and then from San Salvador to Managua, Nicaragua, which has lax visa requirements, and then from there overland to the U.S. border. U.S. officials were seeing a spike in Mauritanian migrants at the southern border, and they couldn't explain why. There was no war, no famine, no major political crisis. Just travel agencies and social media influencers in West Africa promoting a multi-leg route that worked for migrating to the United States. Of course, until it didn't work. So, El Salvador didn't close the route. They priced it out of existence. $1,130 per person per transit. That's not just for the airport improvement. That's a migration deterrence dressed up as infrastructure spending. And El Salvador isn't the only one reacting to this. Nicaragua, the final destination on that route, just overhauled its entire visa system last month. As of February 2026, over 120 nationalities that previously had visa-free access now need prior authorization from Managua before they can even board a plane. Panama has also tightened its transit rules recently. In 2023, they required nationals from over 45 countries to hold a valid Western visa just to change planes at Tucumán International Airport in Panama. 3 countries, 1 migration route, each one is closing its section of the door independently. Every country on Earth reserves the right to decide who transits through its territory and on what terms. That's not controversial. That's sovereignty. Visas are nationality-based screening, and they always have been. You might disagree with the price tag, you can disagree with the execution, but the policy itself, sorting travelers by passport, is the oldest rule in international travel. El Salvador just made the sorting a bit louder and a little bit more expensive. And the only thing that changes your experience at that check-in counter is the document you hold in your hand. So to understand a little bit more about this, picture this. You're a Nigerian entrepreneur living in Canada. You book a trip to Costa Rica with 3 of your friends, all of whom hold Canadian passports. You check in at the airport, your friends walk through, but you get pulled aside. An official hands you a document requiring an immediate payment of 1,500 Canadian dollars just to transit through El Salvador's airport on the way to your destination. Not to enter the country, not to use any services, just to change planes. And you'll pay the same amount on your return flight. Your friends, they paid nothing. The same flight, the same destination, but a different passport. Now, nobody has ever promised you that the world would treat every passport equally, and it never has. The question is, what are you going to do about it if your passport isn't being treated as fairly as you think it should? Okay. So this is a real story. It went viral, and variations of it have been playing out since late 2023 for travelers from all 57 affected countries. The fee is $1,130 US. 1,000 base plus a 13% VAT. Credit card payments only, cash is not accepted. And here's the part that some people think borders on the absurd. Even after you pay, El Salvador's immigration authority can still deny your transit at their discretion. You could pay over $1,000 and still not board. An Avianca flight connecting through San Salvador typically runs $200 to $400 for the flight itself. The transit fee is $1,130. If your route takes you through El Salvador in both directions, that's $2,260 in transit fees alone on top of your base airfare. For context, that's more than many of the business class fares on a round-trip basis within the region. Of course, the alternatives aren't necessarily simpler either. If you're an Indian passport holder flying from Mumbai to Costa Rica, your routing options that avoid El Salvador mean longer layovers, additional connections, possibly through Panama City or Miami, both of which will also have their own visa requirements for Indian nationals. The US requires a transit visa even if you never leave the airport. That's a $185 application fee, an embassy interview, and weeks of processing time. So for people with affected passports, there's no free path here. Every route has a cost, and every cost is determined by one thing: the passport that you carry. So before you travel anywhere with a connection, you are responsible for checking the transit requirements with your airline and your country's embassies. Call the airline directly. Email the airport authority. Don't assume that your routing is fee-free because it was last year. Things are changing faster than they ever had in the world. And of course, if you're watching this from the US or Europe, you might be thinking, this doesn't apply to me. But the UK has already begun requiring direct airside transit visas for nationals from a specific list of countries, including India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and many others. They now need permission to change planes at Heathrow. The Schengen zone requires airport transit visas for nationals of 16 countries. Even to stay in the international zone of a European airport, you would need a separate visa. Now, Australia has a transit visa requirement. Canada has one too. The US itself requires a transit visa for anyone not in the visa waiver program. And the infrastructure for these fees is expanding, not contracting. The ETIAS is coming for Americans who are visiting Europe, a pre-travel authorization system that doesn't quite exist yet but will later this year. The United Kingdom's electronic travel authorization is already rolled out. Every one of these systems is a framework, and every framework can be tightened. The fees can be raised. The list of affected nationalities can be expanded. 10 years ago, Americans didn't need a pre-authorization to visit the United Kingdom. Now they will. What El Salvador did isn't an anomaly. It's a preview of what's happening worldwide. This is why we talk about second passports on this channel. Not as a luxury, not as a hobby for the wealthy, but as a hedge. If your mobility, your ability to board a plane and transit through a country depends entirely on a single document issued by a single government, you have a single point of failure. A second passport from a country with a strong visa-free access eliminates your exposure to nationality-based restrictions. But how you get that passport matters more than ever. The shortcuts used to be citizenship by investment. Write a check, get a Caribbean passport. But that door is closing from every direction. Canada revoked visa-free access for Antigua. The United Kingdom has revoked access from Dominica. The EU has banned Vanuatu and ruled Malta's program violates the EU law. As of January 2026, the US is restricting access to all CBI nations directly. However, the path that still holds up is the residency to citizenship route. Mexico, Panama, Portugal. It takes longer, but the result is a citizenship that no government is targeting, no algorithm is flagging, and no proclamation could ever revoke. You earn it, and once you hold it, it's yours forever. The pattern is consistent. Programs tighten over time, not loosen. Panama's Friendly Nations visa went from $5,000 to $200,000 just a couple years ago. Paraguay has started enforcing physical presence checks on its residency holders. The UK is adding authorization requirements for travelers who used to walk through there freely. Nicaragua has just revoked visa-free access for over 100 countries with a single decree. And if you think citizenship by investment is the shortcut around all of this, it's not. The US expanded its travel ban in December of 2025 to cover 39 countries, 19 under full bans, 20 under partial restrictions. And the ban specifically targeted Antigua, Barbuda, and Dominica, not because of terrorism or instability, but because of their CBI programs. The US government called those programs a screening risk. I made an entire video breaking down what that means for anyone holding or considering a Caribbean passport. Check the card right here. And these are not one-off situations. This is the United States, the United Kingdom, the EU, and Canada all arriving at the same conclusion. A bought citizenship is a liability, not an asset. The only passports that hold up under this kind of scrutiny are the ones you earn through a legitimate residency pathway, which means the real question isn't whether to diversify, it's how. The only protection is having options you built before you needed them. A passport portfolio grounded in earned citizenship, not purchased paper, means that no single government's policy shifts can ground you. That's not paranoia, that's planning. So grab one of our do-it-yourself guides or book a strategy call. The people who plan ahead are the ones with options when the rule changes. Now, here's what most Americans and Europeans don't realize. Your passport has already lost ground. The US passport provided visa-free access to 193 countries at its peak. That number has dipped. Countries have added entry fees, pre-authorization requirements, and biometric registration systems that didn't exist just 5 years ago. Bali is charging an arrival fee now. Thailand has approved one. Venice charges tourists just to walk through the city. Every new travel authorization framework, the ETIAS, the EES, or the UK's ETA, is a system built to screen, to charge, and to, if necessary, restrict travelers by nationality. Right now, those systems are set to approve almost anyone, but the architecture is in place to do exactly what El Salvador did: create a tiered access based on which passport you carry. The only difference right now is scale. Americans transiting through a foreign airport don't pay $1,130 today, but 10 years ago, nobody in India or Nigeria imagined they'd pay to change planes in Central America either. The point isn't that your passport is bad. The point is that it's your only one, and a single point of failure in your global mobility strategy is exactly that: a vulnerability. The infrastructure to monetize it is being built out right now. You just haven't been charged yet. And if your plan was to solve it by buying a Caribbean passport, that plan is already compromised. The US, the UK, the EU, Canada are all treating CBI citizenships as red flags, not solutions. $250,000 for a passport that gets flagged at every new screening system, it's not a hedge. That's an expensive mistake. Sharing a viral video doesn't change the fees. Filing a complaint doesn't change the fees. The only thing that changes your experience at that check-in counter is the document in your hand. Everything else is commentary. And the only second passports that are going to hold up under this increased level of scrutiny are ones that you earn: residency to citizenship in a country with real economic weight and a clean reputation. That takes longer than writing a check, but it works when nothing else does. I cover the UK's new electronic travel authorization in a separate video. If you haven't seen it, check the card right here. The trend is global: more screening, more fees, more systems that sort travelers by nationality before they ever even reach the border. The era of showing up with a passport and walking through is ending. The question is whether or not you're positioning yourself ahead of it or reacting after it's too late. The best time to take action was 2 years ago. The second best time is today. Build a plan, diversify your options, and if you need help mapping that out, whether it's doing it yourself or a custom strategy, the link is in the bio. We'll build you a plan that doesn't fall apart the next time a country rewrites its rules. Remember, the right information makes it all possible. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats, and I'll see you in our next video.